that introduction. Thank you for the thumbs up, Penny. I'm really happy to be here. Um, a couple of things I want to point out about the election. And I want to talk about the local, the state, and the national election in that order. My comments on the national election will be relatively limited because I think other people are going to talk about that. But let me talk first about what happened in San Francisco. The most remarkable thing about the San Francisco election is that $5 million in outside money didn't win. We saw, and I've been doing this going on 40 years now, and I have rarely seen this kind of money come into local elections, particularly district elections supervisors, from this small a group of people in my entire career of doing this. We're talking about big real estate, big tech, and some people who are big Republican donors. William Obendorf, who has given like $2 million to keep Mitch McConnell in office, poured money into a series of interlinked, kind of confusing political action committees. Some of them registered at the state level, some of them registered at the local level, making it difficult to track where the money was really coming from. But this money came in to attack tax measures, progressive tax measures that would have done a little bit and will do a little bit for economic inequality in San Francisco, and to attack progressive candidates for the Board of Supervisors. It was, I don't know how many of you live in districts 1, 5, or 7. If you live in 1, 5, or 7, you got this mail. And it was astonishing. It was lies, it was racist, it was disgusting, and it was all funded by a small group of very, very wealthy people. And I sat back when I first saw this money start to drop. It's like, why does William Obendorf care who's the District 1 supervisor in San Francisco? I don't think he even lives here anymore, right? Why do all these big tech people care who's the District 5 supervisor? Why do they care about who gets elected to this board? Well, it's because, obviously, I can make two arguments. And one argument, I think, is that the mayor of San Francisco felt the same way that the big money did. And she put her efforts into electing the exact same candidates that the big money was behind, right? That is not proof of any connection, but it is an interesting coincidence, right? The second thing is the Progressive Board of Supervisors will be in a position, and is in a position, to do what the more moderate Board of Supervisors failed to do in the past decade, which is to regulate the tech industry as new things come online. We didn't regulate Airbnb. We let Airbnb violate the law every single day in San Francisco for 5 years, forcing thousands of people out of their homes. Right? And we did nothing about it. They were breaking the law. Now they're about to go public for $38 billion. And guess what? The San Francisco kingmaker, Ron Conway, was an early investor in Airbnb. He'll probably make $1 billion off of all of the evictions that happened in San Francisco because we didn't regulate them. We didn't regulate Uber and Lyft, who destroyed the taxi industry in San Francisco, and who have, I'll talk about this in a second, just spent $200 million to overturn California labor law in the interest of just two or three corporations. Every single Uber and Lyft in San Francisco was illegal. They were illegal taxis. We did nothing about it because the mayor didn't want to, and because the supervisors refused. Right? So the next thing that comes along, the next one I'm hearing about is robot deliveries. Amazon wants to put, another company want to put robots on our sidewalks to deliver packages so they don't have to pay drivers at all. And now I hear that Amazon wants to have big drones flying around through the sky, dropping packages in front of your house. So again, they don't have to pay any drivers at all, and no benefits and no nothing, right? This is a little dicey, right? I live on a hill where the sidewalk is pretty narrow, and there are two people in wheelchairs on my street. Two of my neighbors use wheelchairs. I don't see how the robot thing is going to work, right? I just think this is really potentially very dangerous. But the tech people who invest in these inventions don't want them regulated. Driverless cars. Pretty soon, Uber and Lyft are going to try to get rid of all their drivers and just have driverless cars. The San Francisco city government can regulate this. And the San Francisco city government can also do what we have been doing, which is protecting tenants from evictions during COVID, helping small businesses, and protecting both residential tenants and small commercial tenants. The real estate industry doesn't like that. Right? So these big national operations have interest in San Francisco. In fact, Proposition I, which raised the transfer tax on properties that sell for more than $10 million. And when I look at, by the way, as you probably all know, when I look at economic issues in San Francisco, I look at them through an equity lens. I look at them through a lens not of equality, which means a level playing field, which we don't have in this country, but equity. And as the scholar Susan Feinstein says, equity is by definition redistributive. Equity means taking wealth and power from those who have too much of it and giving it to others. Right? From an equity perspective, Prop I was a great step. It's taking money from the very wealthy owners of big real estate and putting it into subsidies for tenants who may lose their homes because they lost their jobs. Right? This is a good equity measure. However, Oz Erickson, who was a big real estate developer in town, sent an email out to all of his friends in the real estate industry and literally said, if this passes in San Francisco, it will spread to other cities. This type of taxation on the rich, once they do it in San Francisco, we're going to see efforts to tax big real estate all over the country. It's going to spread. Like, remember the spread of international communism we were all, supposed to be worried about 40 years ago? Well, we're going to spread the progressive message of taxing the rich out of San. So we have to kill it here. We have to stop it before it emerges in San Francisco and sneaks out like a monster and we start taxing the rich all over the country. So they failed. Millions and millions of dollars poured into the city to keep Connie Chan from being elected supervisor in District 1, to keep Dean Preston from being reelected supervisor in District 5, to keep Velasca Wen from being elected supervisor in District 7, to keep John Avalos from being elected district supervisor in District 11, and to stop these tax measures. There's a second tax measure that may not bring in that much money, but it's a great idea. Basically, it would increase business taxes on companies whose CEO makes 100 times more than the average employee. Right? Another great idea in San Francisco that could spread nationwide. So all of this money came in and it didn't work. The tax measures won overwhelmingly. Connie Chan was elected supervisor in District 1. Dean Preston, by only a few votes, but she was elected. Dean, against somebody who had run at least once before and had lots of money, and had the mayor's backing, the mayor's strong backing. Dean Preston was reelected in District 5. Joe Lingardio, the mayor's preferred candidate and the big money's preferred candidate, did not win in District 7. Myrna Melgar won, who had a fair amount of progressive support, won in District 7. Right? So the attempt, John Avalos did not win in District 11, but that was really, of all of them, probably the toughest race, the most difficult. So, and all the tax measures. So when you look at what happened in the city, you look at San Francisco basically rejecting big money efforts from out of town to control what happens on the board. Right? Also, you'll note that the mayor of San Francisco typically doesn't have big coattails in elections, particularly in elections like this, where, this is kind of like a midterm election where the mayor was elected last year and now the Board of Supervisors is elected in a different election. And in a sense, it's kind of a up or down vote on whether you like the priorities of the current administration. And the message that the voters seem to send is, no, we're not happy with the direction that this administration is going. And we want the Board of Supervisors to be a check on the executive. And we are willing to tax the rich to pay for services for poorer people. So that was really a very uplifting experience. Then we look at the state. And one of the remarkable things about this election was how different the state of California is from the city and county of San Francisco. And we forget this a lot of times. We think, California is a deep blue state and it's going to vote overwhelmingly for Biden, and all of that is true. And yet, Californians rejected affirmative action. This is almost mind-boggling to me. Californians voted down a measure that would have allowed the state to and cities and counties to use race as a factor in public contracting and education. When the original measure 20 years ago, I believe it was Prop 209, passed to end affirmative action at the University of California, the percentage of African-American students dropped dramatically and has not recovered. It blows my mind that the state would not approve this. Right? It also is astonishing to me that the voters of the state of California did not pass Prop 15. Right? Prop 15 was in terms of overall fiscal impact, the biggest thing on the ballot in the entire state of California. Prop 15, as you all know, would have made it possible to increase taxes on big commercial real estate to the level where they should be. It would have allowed us, for example, to raise taxes on Donald Trump, who owns a third of the Bank of America building. There was so much misinformation about this. There was so much money coming in and trying to confuse people. I was on KPFA a week before the election, and somebody called in and said, I can't vote for Prop 15 because I'm a small landlord in Berkeley and I'm a senior and I have a senior living in my in-law apartment, and my property taxes will go up so much I'll have to evict my tenant and sell the house. And she was a really sincere, nice person. And I said, ma'am, where did you ever hear that? And she said, well, that's what all the ads say. We're going to repeal Prop 13 and my taxes are going to go up. And I had to say, you know what? This has absolutely zero impact on residential property. Those ads are wrong. They are lies. This does not impact your house or your tenant. It only impacts Disneyland and Donald Trump. And at any rate, the misinformation in the state of California that caused people to reject Prop 15, reject affirmative action, and then approve a measure by two companies, Uber and Lyft, with a little money from DoorDash, to exempt their employees from state labor law. Talk about sending a message that can resound around the country, right? This is one of the most alarming things that I've seen on the California ballot in a long time. And the fact that two big companies, who, by the way, got their start by breaking the law in San Francisco, and by abusing labor, were able to convince enough voters to pass a measure exempting them from state labor law is just astonishing. And the problem is, of course, next will be somebody else. Next, some other company's going to come along and say, oh, I don't want my employees to get benefits either. I don't want to pay their Social Security. I don't want to pay their disability. I don't want to give them health insurance. So I want to be exempt from California labor law. So now maybe we'll exempt somebody else. And then we'll exempt somebody else. And then, you know, Elon Musk will say, I want to exempt all the employees at the Tesla factory because it's a new tech company. Who knows? But if you can spend $200 million to save billions by screwing your employees, and the state of California lets the voters get away with that, or the voters of the state of California go along with it, it's a disturbing message, even in a year when we got overwhelming support for the Democratic ticket, right? I have about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, 3, right. Yeah.
3 minutes. Okay. In the last 3 minutes, I just want to give you all something to think about. All right. The Democrats won, and that's a grand thing. But a lot of people voted for Donald Trump. An awful lot of people voted. And some of them are racists. Some of them are anti-immigrant. Some of them are part of the religious right that wants to see Roe v. Wade overturned. But that's a third of the electorate. Right? There's a lot of people who voted for Trump who don't fit in those categories. And that's something I think the Democratic Party has to think about. There are a lot of people, in my mind, who voted for Trump because they are sick of what they see as rich elites not paying attention to them. And they're sick of the economic inequality in this country, and they don't understand the roots of it. A lot of them would have voted for Bernie Sanders, right? A lot of them would have voted for Bernie. And yet, you know, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and there's just an awful lot of people who say the Democrats are the party of Goldman Sachs. The Democrats are the party of finance, of Wall Street. And Donald Trump was able to play on that. Because when you have, and I'm quoting Thomas Piketty here, those of you who have not read Thomas Piketty's book, you should read it. Capital in the 21st Century. It's the most important critique of capitalism since Marx. And I'm absolutely serious about that. You should all read this book. What he says is, economic inequality, which is rapidly growing around the world, leads to societal collapse. It leads to social collapse. Right? This level of economic inequality is unsustainable, and it leads to social collapse. And that is part of what we saw in this election. We saw the beginning of social collapse. Right? We're even seeing it now with Trump refusing to concede. Right? So I don't think it's a coincidence that while obviously Donald Trump is an elite and the people funding him are about the most rich elite people there could possibly be, right-wing demagoguery comes out of economic inequality. And that is something that the Democrats need to pay attention to. All right, I'll stop there, or just flash the sign at me. Thank you. I'll stop there and take questions.
Thank you, Tim. So now we're going to go to Q&A, and I'm going to review the Q&A, how you ask questions. You can go into the chat write stack in the chat. Make sure you have everyone on the drop-down menu. You can raise your hand in the participant box. If you don't know how to do that, you go to the bottom of the participant box and you'll see an icon that says raise hand, and you just click on that. I'll recognize people in the order that they raise their hands. If you prefer, you can write your question in the chat. And okay, so we have 20 minutes for Q&A for Tim Redmond only, and then we're gonna have Henny Kelly speak. The first hand went up by the caller whose phone number ends in 575. So you have 30 seconds or less to ask your question, make your comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I wonder if you can comment on the shelter-in-place hotel accommodations for homeless seniors being phased out, and also the police MOU extension. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to address both of those very quickly. They're not directly related to the election, but they partially are. First of all, the shelter-in-place hotel program has been a phenomenal success. Originally, we were told, people on the streets can't just move into hotels. They're not going to have the stability. They're going to trash the hotel rooms. They're going to do this. It has been a phenomenal success. The hotel owners are happy. They're getting some money. The people who are living in the hotels have gotten some stability in their lives. This has worked, right? Number two, it's not really costing anything. Like in the presentation, I did a story last week about the mayor's office presentation to the Board of Supervisors on closing down these hotels. It was astonishing. It was mind-boggling, some of the things that they said, right? They said, we budgeted $172 million for this and we're running out of money. That sounds like a lot of money. But when the supervisors asked the controller, how much of that comes from the general fund? It's about $3 million. Most of the money comes from FEMA. It's federal money that's paying for this. This is not coming out of San Francisco taxpayers' pockets. Oh, and by the way, we have an extra $150 million a year from Prop C, which the mayor opposed, which we can now use to support this program too. So why are we moving homeless, at-risk seniors out of hotel rooms? It doesn't make any sense. In fact, as Dean Preston said, there's 6,000 more people on the streets. Why aren't we expanding this program? I mean, the reality is most of these, this is not the Hyatt. These are like tier 2 and tier 3 hotels. Most of these will not be occupied again for at least 5 years. Tourism is not going to come back that quickly. So they're all on the market. I mean, the city ought to be buying these hotels and turning them into permanent supportive housing. It's the cheapest. I mean, $3 million since June to house 2,400 people. I mean, that's a great deal. And if we can buy some of these hotels for $20 or $30 million, it's way cheaper than building affordable housing from scratch. Why aren't we doing that instead of kicking people out? It doesn't make any sense. Now, the MOU is a complex topic I don't want to spend too much time on, but the MOU with the cops basically allows them to get significant raises deferred for 1 year and in exchange for nothing, no willingness to accept any reforms. The Police Officers Association has been the #1 obstacle to reform in the department, and we are rewarding them in exchange for absolutely nothing. Now, of course, the challenge here is the mayor has made it very clear that if the supervisors don't pass this MOU, that there will be a $10 million hole in the budget from the deferred raises, and she can use that as an excuse to lay off other unionized city employees. That's the threat, and that's what we're hearing. Again, $10 million. The police budget in San Francisco is over $700 million. You could find that 10 million easily enough and not lay anyone off. And no one's talking about laying off cops. The police officers in San Francisco are very well compensated, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but if we're going to give them a raise when we're talking about laying off other unionized city employees, we should at least ask them to go along with reforms. So that's at the Board of Supervisors today.
Okay, we're going to have the next question be from Robin. Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Tim. Thank you. My question is, when I was chatting on Nextdoor with all my neighbors, there was chat from the small business owners saying that their property owners would pass the tax on to them from Prop 15 in their lease. So they were saying that their property owners would not be paying that extra tax, that they were going to pass it on the leases to the tenants. And I wanted to know if there was any truth to this.
Yeah, a lot of commercial tenants in San Francisco have what's known as triple net leases, which means that yes, the landlords can pass along utility costs, taxes, et cetera, to the tenants. But think about this for a minute. The vast majority of these taxes would be paid by a small percentage of big property owners. Who's in the Bank of America building? Besides Bank of America.
Who's in it?
Yeah, there's not a lot of small businesses in the Bank of America building, right? So the number of small businesses who are in very large complexes where the landlords can pass those costs on is relatively limited. It does exist. It is absolutely a problem. But remember, the law, Prop 15, would not require cities to do anything. It would just allow. So it would allow San Francisco to raise property taxes on commercial property. But the city and county of San Francisco, the assessor, the board of supervisors would be able to set those taxes. So for example, the board of supervisors could decide not to raise property taxes on property worth less than $20 million if they decided to. This was enabling legislation. It was not mandating. Right? So it would be, once again, property taxes for commercial buildings would be county by county the way they were before Prop 13.
So people will be lobbying the board of supervisors then if it had
which
passed.
is how it should be. Which is how it should be.
Thank
so
you.
That's the interesting element of this. And the data shows that like 80% of the taxes would be paid by 10% of the property owners.
Okay, our next question is from Matthew.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a point about home sharing. You talked about that issue, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that it's not possible anymore because of San Francisco's very restrictive law in the home sharing area. We're a senior group. We have a lot of seniors that use it to stay in their homes and be able to afford rent in San Francisco or pay toward their mortgage. Now there's extremist groups that would like to do away with it completely, but I think we need to clarify that the kind of extreme things that you're talking about are years old, and San Francisco has one of the most restrictive.
We have a 30-second limit. Can you ask a question, or is that
one of the most restrictive in the nation? So, in that regard, so Tim, if you want to comment on that, please do.
Yes, absolutely. We did eventually regulate Airbnb, and one of the things that the city finally did after regulations were shot down by a 6-5 vote numerous times, the city finally, years after this all started, put restrictions on Airbnb and specifically said that you can't, it has to be the place where you live. You can't like buy a building, evict all the tenants and turn it into an Airbnb.
Right. So what you're saying, it can no longer, what the point you brought up can no longer occur.
Follow-ups. You just let him ask.
Absolutely. But I completely agree with the speaker that what I was talking about was in the past. We failed to regulate Airbnb at a time when we should have regulated it. And that's what led to thousands of evictions. Not today. Today, we finally have gotten around to regulating it. We didn't regulate Uber and Lyft. And then when we tried to, they went to the state. And the state overrode our ability to regulate. And I'm not saying that these things are bad. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have Uber and Lyft, or we shouldn't have Airbnb, or that we shouldn't have robots on the sidewalks. What I'm saying is they need to be regulated, and they need to be regulated early in the process before they cause a lot of problems. That's all.
Well, San Francisco did have a long history of allowing home sharing, and thank goodness, like with the Green Book, it was able to be done. But San Francisco had that history.
We're going to go on to our next question. I'm going to unmute Betsy in the East Bay. Go ahead, Betsy.
You kind of have me being unmuted. This is Helen. I'm not Betsy.
Okay, Helen, were you the one that asked the question?
No, I have the question, although Helen may have one too.
I had the unmute
Helen
thing,
does.
so it's okay. I'm in the raise hand. I'll put my hand back up. No problem.
Betsy first, go ahead, Betsy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Art, for organizing this. And thank you, Tim Redmond, for confirming in a big way what I had a chance to observe in the election in Berkeley, California. We had $200,000, not much, but the same real estate interests and Uber Lyft bulk advertising company they hired delivered, plus the California NAACP, delivered really misleading, fraudulent, maybe even senior abuse and very nasty ads
You asked me a
around.
question?
So my question is, have you written this up yet? Can I be, I would like to bring this information into Berkeley. Thank you. My question is more, where do you see, how can we organize around dark money? Around that dark money coming in
Thank
and
you, Betsy.
exposing these real estate,
Thank you,
It's
Betsy.
an excellent question. And one of the big challenges, honestly, I'll be honest here, not self-promotional, but honest, that one of the big problems is we don't have local media anymore. There's no daily newspaper in Berkeley and Oakland that of the size and type. And now you have Berkeley Side, thank God, but you don't have a aggressive local daily newspaper that's covering this and that's informing people. So with the lack of news media in communities, and that's not just Berkeley, San Francisco, the Chronicle did not say one word about this dark money until like 2 days before the election. And then it was a very half-hearted story that kind of buried the point way down. If you don't have aggressive local media informing people about this, it's much, much more difficult to organize. But the good news is we did it. I mean, the good news is, I'm saying we, not me personally, but we, the group of us all here together, the progressive movement in San Francisco, managed to, and in Berkeley and in the East Bay, managed to overcome that dark money with good old-fashioned organizing, even during a pandemic. And that's a very encouraging thing.
Okay, the next question is from Sally Franzman. Sally, I'm trying to unmute you. See if you're unmuted. Try asking. If I can't do it, we'll have to come back to you. Or put your question in the chat. There you go. I think we got you done. Sally, can you ask your question?
Yeah, it's kind of like harking back to what you said. I'm in Portland, so my horse is different than the horses in this race, clearly. But harking back to what you said about the hotels for homeless people, we had a program apparently like that it would have affected me if I got COVID. So I was asking questions that had money to basically provide rent assistance, alternate housing, like it would be for the homeless and stuff, for people who were in situations where they could not lock down. Like I live in a house with 8 other adults. If I get COVID, it's at risk to everybody else. It's month to month. So they're like not necessarily, my landlady isn't necessarily beholden to even keep me necessarily.
Sally, can you ask a question? Or...
Yeah, I'm asking, was there a program like that in San Francisco? And they're running out of money here, but it's similar to what's happening, what you said with homeless, but it's not exactly the same. Was there something like that here? And what could we possibly do, us, to protect people in my kind of situation? Because I'm not.
Thank you, Sally.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It actually fits in with Jennifer Young posted something in the chat saying vulnerable seniors need to be with other seniors and not recovering drug addicts whose target seniors for their resources. And I agree with both of these points. But what I'm saying is that's a decision that can be made pretty easily by case managers who could, for example, use certain hotels just for seniors who are not facing substance abuse or mental health issues. And as in Portland, I don't know what's going on in Portland, but what I do know is that all over the country in major cities, there are tier 2 and 3, or they're called class B and C hotels, the cheaper hotels, right, that are empty now of tourists and that are not going to fill up for a long time. And the owners of these hotels are typically not multinational corporations. They're going to wait out the next 10 years like Hilton and Hyatt and all these folks. They're typically family-owned or small businesses, and they're looking to sell. And this is a great opportunity for cities to buy existing housing that can be turned into supportive, affordable housing. And then who lives in which ones is something that local case managers ought to be able to handle.
Okay, next question is from Helen. I'm trying to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, the message, I got it. Hi, Tim, thanks. Trying to frame my question here, but it does have to do with technology. It has to do with all the issues that you're covering. I'm also going to include a disability perspective and senior perspective here. In the era we are right now in technology, what I'm discovering is everything's based on data, with data being taken online, and the surveys and information not including seniors, one of our largest populations and the diverse community of persons with disabilities, were kind of left out. So how would you strategize with that, with a voice? I know showing up at meetings is one of the things we should be doing, but I'd like to get this would also have to do with transportation, for instance. SFMTA has said on meetings that it's a severe cut. They may not have a comeback. So now people have to use technology, but people are outside of being able to do that. I think GoGo Grandparents is about the only place you can call in to get yourself a ride in San Francisco or meals. With that being said,
wrap it up, please.
with that being said, it's a data collection is what's missing. I'd be very curious to read anything that you might write on what's going on with collecting data.
Okay, go ahead. Answer
Yeah,
that.
no, it's a very good point, and I think it applies to seniors, but it also the digital divide, as we're talking, also applies to low-income people and to low-income students who can't go online for class because they don't have a Wi-Fi connection at home. And all of this, I think, is a much larger social question that needs to be looked at. And because I'm a public sector person, I actually think that broadband access is like water. It's a necessity of life these days. And it ought to be like water. It ought to be controlled by the municipality, and everyone should get it for almost nothing. Right? Basically, every house in San Francisco should be wired for broadband, and the city should own that system. And the thing that makes me crazy, and this is just a thing that drives Tim crazy in the world, fiber optic cable is cheap, right? The cable is cheap. What's expensive is digging up the street, right? That's what costs money. So all over this, they dug up all of Bernal Heights, where I live, a couple of years ago to replace the sewers. Great. We need to replace the sewers. We already dug up the streets. Why aren't we laying fiber optic cable at the same time? Right? That's cheap. Every time we dig up a street in San Francisco, we ought to be installing municipal broadband because it's great. Anyway, that's.
Final question in this segment is from David Hartso.
Thanks very much, Tim, for all the good work you do and analysis. My question is on things like the affirmative action and the Uber Lyft votes. Why did these fail? Is it just people are gullible to lies and propaganda? And are there ways that we can outlaw dark money in referendums, so it's really going to represent the people's thinking and their interests, not dark money?
So it is an excellent question. And it is an excellent question for the state of California. The problem, I mean, there's a lot of problems. One problem is the state of California is such a big place, right? It is very hard to communicate with millions and millions of voters if you don't have millions and millions of dollars. And I'm going to come back to this again. Part of the problem is we don't have an independent communications infrastructure to counter all of these lies, right? I mean, we don't have statewide newspapers like we used to. The LA Times is doing okay, but Sacramento Bee is dying, and local. We don't have the communications infrastructure that people read, because a lot of people don't read newspapers anymore. Where do voters get their information? A lot of voters get their information from social media, and social media is dominated by a couple of big corporations. And we all know from the problems with the national election, the problem that leads to. It's a big, big challenge, because if you've got $50 million, you can communicate with voters all over the state of California. And if you don't have $50 million, it's very, very difficult to do that. So, I don't have an easy answer for that one, David, except to, overturn Citizens United and get money out of politics. But that's a long-term struggle. I just want to say, too, in the 1 minute I have left, the the person who was talking about Airbnb and home sharing, because this fits with so many other things that I've seen happening in the last 20 years. Yes, there's always been home sharing in San Francisco. Yes, people have had informal networks where they rented out rooms to people, and there was the Green Book. And in fact, for years, particularly in the South, this is how African Americans travel when they weren't allowed in hotels, right? This was just fine until someone decided to make $1 billion on it. And the minute that Airbnb got involved as a big tech company, and now they're going to go public and make $40 billion, they screwed it up for everybody, right? Because we didn't regulate it. And so all the people who are just trying to do this on their own to make a few extra bucks, now it became such a massive problem that we had to regulate it. So that's the thing that gets me about so much of this. You know, it's once somebody comes along and decides they're going to get rich on something, and then they have to scale it. So then it's not a little small informal network. And now everyone gets to do it, and we're going to make billions of dollars on it. It ruins it for everybody. Stop now, please. Thanks. I'm done. All right.
Thank you, Tim, for being here today. Really,
absolutely. And I'm sorry I have to leave. I have another meeting.
Okay. Everybody say goodbye to Tim. And thank you.
And I will turn it over to Henny, who will be even better than me and understands all these issues even better than I do.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, thanks.
Okay, now we're going to have a great speaker, another great speaker, Henny Kelly. She's a retired San Francisco public school teacher, retired CFT union leader, an officer of the San Francisco Labor Council, and a vice president and the legislative director of the California Alliance for Retired Americans, AKA CARA, which represents more than 1 million retired union members and retired members of community groups. She's also the director of Region 6 of California Democratic Party and chair of its Disability Caucus. Henny is an awe-inspiring presence wherever she goes, whether it's in a meeting or a street rally, where she can hold forth and be heard clearly without a mic. Henny, take it away.
All right. Basically, let's start with the last speaker and the last question. And that's David. And David, this is a problem. We got the Secretary of State to change some of the wording that was on propositions on the opposite side of propositions than we wanted because it was lies. However, they then could put it on television because you can say anything you want. And it is a very, very difficult thing. So we're going to talk about what happened with the measures in the state. We know that San Francisco voted correctly. We know that Berkeley and most of Alameda voted correctly. And correctly is basically for the people. But what happened everywhere else? And I'm going to share something with you that not many people know, but there is another county that votes exactly like San Francisco in every election on propositions, in every election on senators and congressmen. This is a really wonderful thing to know. It's Alpine County. Alpine County is basically, Markleeville is its center, and it basically is in the elbow of California on the northeast corner. And it has about 1,150 people. And they vote right. I don't know why. I just know if you're thinking, if you like snow and you're thinking of a place to go, you go there and spend some money on their stuff. And especially in the summer, it's great. But anyway, here's what happened. And, I looked at how people did endorsements. And if you look at the California Federation of Labor, and you look at the California Democratic Party, and then you look at CARA, you will see that we all almost completely agreed on the measures for the endorsements on measures. And yet, California disagreed with us completely. It was absolutely mind-boggling to people. Usually, and I'll tell you this about the California County Democratic Party, we always agree, we don't always agree on who we want to vote for, but we always agree on our ballot measures. And right here, this went just the opposite way, and it is very interesting. Somebody here mentioned the NAACP. You know, there's a woman at the NAACP who is the state chair, and she took money to go against propositions that would help African Americans, would help people of color, would help seniors and people with disabilities. And she's been doing it for the past 30 years. So, you know, you've got to look at that, and we've got to do something about that. And that would have changed a lot of things, because her statement that was all over the news, that she got paid for. And I'm sure when they put the money that she got paid for, it came up to about $5 million. That has got to stop. But let's look at these propositions, right? We are talking about we're talking about one of the most important things there, and that was cash bail. This is a terrible thing. 25. We lost on that NAACP, and big money came out on that and really said it would hurt Black people. So it failed. They went and talked to the most progressive people in their ads, and that really hurt. So let's just look at some of the propositions, because you guys know that we basically did well on everything else. I mean, statewide, we almost won all of the people that we wanted to win. We didn't lose very many Democrats. We didn't lose very many progressive Democrats. And a lot of you are way on the progressive side and not even Democrats. And so what we're talking about here are the ones that are the most important, and I'm going to go back to some of the ones that were talked about before, but Prop 15. What happened to Prop 15 and how they beat us on Prop 15 was the last 2.5 weeks. And the ads were done by people who said they were from small businesses, and they were all people of color, and they spoke against it sounded like they were speaking against corporations. They said corporations aren't going to pay this, they're going to make us pay this. Small businesses, and we'll go out of business. And then they said, and less than 30 cents on a dollar will go to children in schools. It's just like the lottery. And we had no money to tell the truth. In that last 3 weeks, we didn't have the money to get ads on, and we didn't have the wherewithal to do it. This is the exact same thing that they did on every other race. So the question for me is, what can we do to make sure that we have enough money, or to make sure that they can't put the money in? The interesting thing about propositions were our state voted to allow our state to be ruled by propositions, because the voters thought that's going to give voters away, and it will be taken away from the legislature. So we will have the way. And then what happened is, that's not true. You can lose, because all the money that goes into these propositions really tells lies, and then it gets voted against. if the legislature puts a proposition in to collect money, it has to pass by 2/3. But if a corporation puts in a proposition about money, it only needs 50% plus 1 vote. And that's why the propositions are really problematic for all of us. And we have to look at that, and we really have to fight for getting big money out and making sure that people who see an ad know where it's coming from and know who put that money in. And we also have to, and I think it's a good project for you guys, we have to out the NAACP or get people to join who will out that woman and the other 5 officers of the state NAACP that only care about money. What I'd like you to do is just ask me questions about any of the endorsement measures. And I think we can get a better way there. I have them all in front of me so I can explain anything that you need explained, or we can talk about what we have to do to change this next election.
Do we have questions? You can just raise your hand in the participant bar or wave your hand in the window. We'll try, or put your question in the chat. I
can also tell you what any of the the ballot measures really would have done and what we can do about it.
Okay, I see that Henny Kelly has, that Haiti Saraf has a question. I'm trying to, okay, there you go. Go ahead and ask your question, Haiti.
Yes, thank you so much for this extremely important topic and the way you're raising it. Who is chosen? Well, no, I'll rephrase that. How do we choose people to write a proposition that represents the majority of the interests of the majority of the people? Because it's unclear how these are written. And is there an advantage to the legislature writing it versus how they're written in this process? I think that may be an important issue.
Well, that is not only an important issue, but there are some things we can do with the legislature because they can write laws and they can also put things in as propositions, and we can get a backing from the legislature. That really does help. But if you look at who does it, I know that the proposition that was so important to us, which was 15, was written by a group of people. It was written by union people, teachers, nurses. It was written by community people. We covered everything in that to make sure that small businesses were not hurt, to make sure that seniors and people who already had owned houses would not have their property raised. We also made sure that the argument that was put in by the opposition did not have lies and did not say that it was going to raise your property. So, all of those things can be done. The question is very good. You really have to have a well-written proposition, and you have to know who wrote it to understand how to vote. And the one thing that I think we need to do is people like you and me need to each talk to 10 friends and tell them about the propositions. And many of them have relatives in other places in California, and see if you can get them to talk. It's kind of an interesting thing. That's what we need to do. We need to one really talk to people, because that's the way, they'll believe you. I'd believe you if I knew you. You're my friend. And I talk to other people, and And that's what we need to do. We try to do it. Kara tries to do that. We talk to people all over the state, whether they're Republican, Democrat, progressive, not progressive. And, you know, we take 20 people and we call them and we talk to them about what the propositions really are. So.
Does anybody else have a question? I don't see questions being raised in the,
Hetty has a follow-up.
okay.
Unless somebody else wants to ask something, it seems to me.
Oh, we do have, excuse me, Katie, we do have
Yeah,
another
let
question.
someone,
Well, thank
go,
you for
go, go.
yielding to this person who has
Of
a
course.
question, I assume. So I'm going to call on Betsy of the East Bay.
Hi, thank you so much. We're also,
And we have 2 minutes left in this
yes.
segment. So make
so
it.
my question
make it
is,
snappy.
I put in the chat additional information that I've also uncovered, that other people have published about the California NAACP. And I am a member of the Berkeley NAACP, and I want to approach this very respectfully, but I believe Kara may be possibly the only organization that might be able to challenge this egregious corruption of what NAACP should be about. But apparently she's a magnificent fundraiser, and so I would love your advice and collaboration, or hear your thoughts about how we could challenge that. Those were actors in those ads.
Yes, they were. You are absolutely right, Betsy, and I will tell you, it has gone to the Democratic Party. It has gone to the Black Caucus of the Democratic Party. We are going to work with them very hard. That's why I'm active in the Democratic Party and in the caucuses there. We also, really, you are right, Kara and other groups should, if you have members who are NAACP members, we really need to speak up. And that's what I have gone to. I have gone to important people in the Black community and said, look, you know, when you say Black Lives Matter, we have got to do something to make sure that just because you're a fundraiser, you know what happens to fundraisers? They get to go to all sorts of countries if they give money to a president, and there are ambassadors. This woman is being that kind of a person. She's getting money, and then she tells people what to do, but she does it only for money. So yeah, I think that Kara, you know, and other organizations really need to get out there and say, you know, we care about NAACP. And we care about Black people, and we really want this done, because she really destroyed all the propositions that we really wanted passed.
Okay, Henny, thanks very much. So we're going to take a 5-minute break now. If people want to sign in, they should go to the Google Doc that's in the chat. It's up there just before 1 o'clock. Could be reposted, I guess. And so we're going to reconvene at 2:08 by my clock. So take a well-deserved 5-minute break, and we'll be back for the exciting conclusion of this SF Gray Panther monthly meeting with more questions and answers from Henny Kelly, and then Bill Fletcher Jr. So stay tuned for that. Take a break. Bye-bye.
You turned it off.
Hey, everybody's unmuted right now, so watch what you say.
Whoa,
I can
I
mute
just-
everybody. I think I
I
will.
just fell over.
Are you
I have
okay?
one last question for Henny, if she
Okay,
has a moment
sure.
before we
Yeah.
start. Bill?
Okay, I'm gonna mute everybody, get back to normal, and we'll call on Shirley. I'll put you in there, Shirley. Henny, let's get you unmuted. Okay, Henny, you're unmuted. And Shirley Golub has a question for you.
Right,
Yeah, I wrote it in the chat because
I see it right there.
yes. So I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, because I remember going to a big meeting
Yeah.
with Nancy Skinner and Scott Wiener and many, many people.
Can
And
you?
I had
Okay.
a sign in my window for 2 years. Schools.
Okay, let
first.
me tell you a little bit about Prop 15. You said I was considering the timing of helping Prop 15. I remember the School and Communities First campaign seemed to have started perhaps 2 years ago. Absolutely right. Here's what happened. We went out and we got signatures for Prop 15, which was going to be schools and community first. 40% going to schools, 60% going to the community, no money going to the state. The money went to the counties, cities, etc. And there was a perfect way of doing that. And then they decided how the money was to be spent, as long as 40% went to schools and 60% went to the community. And that would be community programs for seniors, for people with disabilities, for homeless teenagers, whatever the community thought of. There was a problem with that we noticed after it was written, and that goes to somebody else's question too. And what it did was we were afraid that small businesses could be caught in the change. So what we did, we had enough signatures, and that was Prop 15-1. And what we did was we rewrote it and added all the extra protection for people with small businesses. And then we went back and said to people, this is an even better proposition to change 13. And we got more signatures than anybody has ever gotten on signatures for any proposition. And most of them were done without paying the kind of money you have to pay. We had a lot of volunteers. And we fixed that, and we got many small businesses. If you go to the Prop 15 website, many small businesses and small business organizations backed Prop 15. So that's why it took so long. And that was why we were never going to get it before this November, but it was really 2 years. We had 1 year for the first proposition, then we changed it and strengthened it. But when the opposition saw that, they wrote on the what was going to go into the book that everybody gets about voting, you know, the explanation. They wrote lies about small businesses. They had to remove it. That's why they got the money to do those ads, and they didn't do them early. They did them the last 2.5 weeks because they knew we didn't have the money to get. They outspent us, I think, $15, $17 to 1. So if you look at that, and you also look at the proposition on Uber and Lyft, Uber and Lyft spent enough money to stop drivers from getting real benefits they could have paid drivers for 15 years, decent benefits. They hadn't put the money in. So I hope that answers you.
Okay, are there more questions? I think Heidi had a follow-up, but are there any new people who haven't had a chance to ask the question? I do see that there was a comment and a question in the chat. It says, did the SF-NAACP weigh in? And David and Alice, did they weigh in on what was that Prop 25 you're talking about?
It could have been any of the props.
Prop 15, that's what we're talking about with Alice Huffman.
Yeah, Alice Huffman really did a number on Prop 15. And I have talked to people in the San Francisco NAACP, people who I know are members. That wasn't what they wanted. And they, I think, are almost as upset as we are, many of the members. I don't know about the officers, but many of the members are extremely upset. Some have written letters to the national NAACP, a few professors that I talked to who are on that. So yeah, people are getting to know about Alice Huffman and what she does. I wrote an article for the California Democratic Party. I had many people sign on to it. And we are talking in Kara, as you said, about it. So yeah, it wasn't our NAACP. And that's, you know, in San Francisco and in other areas that I've talked, they didn't realize what she was doing until they saw it. And yet, when I talked to people who've been in for a long time, they said, Alice has been doing this for years.
Okay, our final question or comment is from Emily Lee.
Oh, Hetty is right there too. She had that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have two. Emily, are you ready? Are you?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Emily. I'm from SF Rising. I think Henny gave a great summary of the Prop 15 campaign, and I was just going to add that you know, the San Francisco NAACP, you know, did endorse Prop 15 along with Mayor London Breed, and so that was great. And I think the response to some, you know, some of the statewide organizations like the Million Voters Project and California Calls that also worked on the measure, you know, their kind of reflection was that, you know, the NAACP as a legacy organization, clearly it's not representing the needs and interests of a lot of the Black community in this way. And so, you know, one response that they had immediately was, well, you know, we are actually going to be organizing in Black communities as well and starting to, you know, have more Black organizing projects. So, you know, there's in some ways it's like, you know, again, while the NAACP has a great legacy and a strong history, it's clearly not serving the needs of its members currently. And so, you know, organizations are responding to that. And, you know, they're going to be preparing for the next battle or the next time Prop 15 is on the ballot, probably at the next presidential election.
We will do it.
Yep, that's
This
right.
is not the last time.
Yeah.
You know, this is what keeps me alive. I'm 78 now. I've been working on single payer since I was 50. And you know, I'm not gonna die until we get all of those things. Then not so bad. But thank you for letting me know that and letting the rest of the people know that, Emily.
Okay,
and Hetty?
Our final question to Hedy Saraf.
Okay, I'll make it very brief. And first of all, thank you, Henny, for a wonderful job. I really appreciate it. There are people who say, I may be among them, that there are too many propositions on a ballot, and that people in California get very, very weary of reading them all. They don't understand them. They don't take the time, or we don't. And that the tendency when you're confused is to vote no.
Yes.
Regardless of the content. So I wonder, I tend to agree with that. What are your thoughts and what can we do about it?
First of all, You should know about propositions. They start with 25% of people saying no. If it has anything to do with money, and even if it doesn't.
Right.
That's 25%. So we got to work on the other 75%. You are absolutely right. There are many too many. They are not explained well enough. Most people will not read that. And so this is one of the things that, as I said before, people voted to do this because they thought it would give them power. It doesn't give them power, and I don't think there's any way we'll ever stop, have a proposition. I said I would never sign one of those proposition things unless it said this is the last proposition ever and we won't do it anymore. I've broken that promise for Prop 15 and a few others. But really, that is a real problem. And our way of solving it is to help explain what the propositions are and to talk to as many people as we can, as organizations and as individual people.
Okay, thank you, Henny.
That's it.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, I just need to say something. You have now seen me, all of you, and you know why I am not allowed to play poker.
Okay, Henny, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Our next speaker is Bill Fletcher Jr. He's the executive editor of blackcommentator.com and a leading member of Democratic Socialists of America. He was a co-founder of the Center for Labor Renewal and is the immediate past president of Trans Africa Forum. He's the author of Solidarity Divided, which analyzes the crisis in organized labor in the US. A frequent guest on Pacifica radio station KPFA in Berkeley, especially on the Sunday show, where he does a spectacular job of analyzing the interaction between US politics and social movements through a well-educated lens of progressive values. Bill Fletcher, you have the floor for 15 minutes and then Q&A.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's a real pleasure to be doing this. And I'm actually most interested in any questions or comments that anyone would like to offer. I want to just give an overview in terms of my take on the election. So I think in looking at the election, there are a few different elements that are critical to observe. One was that Biden and his campaign did an amazing job of building a very broad united front against Trump. Very successful. And this is also interesting because it was against an incumbent president. And one of the things that many of us forget is how difficult it is in US history to unseat an incumbent president. In this case, he has been unseated, and with a substantial majority of the popular vote. Problem number one, the defeat of Trump did not translate into the so-called blue wave. And I think that there's a number of factors that are going to have to be looked at there on the side of the Democrats, including the issue of voter suppression that since 2008 has very much hurt Democratic candidates and particularly people of color. A second factor is that the broad united front against Trump did not necessarily translate in terms of the way people viewed down ballot elections. So it appears that there were many people that split their vote, voting against Trump, but voting for a Republican. And in part that speaks to a problem at the level of message and program on the part of those candidates, that the expectation that people would unite in voting against the idiots who supported the idiot in chief simply did not work. And I think it's a very, very important lesson for us, and one that we have to really think about in terms of ongoing efforts and the importance of, you could almost call it the relative autonomy of these down ballot elections from the top of the ballot. Another factor that certainly hurt the Democrats was the COVID crisis, because the COVID pandemic essentially froze the ground game that the Democrats had been planning. And for several months, it meant that the organizing was done virtually. Until August, largely at the impetus of the union Unite Here, there was a return to a ground game that was done quite successfully overall by Unite Here and by others, but it started too late, particularly in Florida. Now, there's another side of this election that I think is really critical, and that's that we have to appreciate that what we saw unfold was an election that was very much affected, influenced by racism, revanchism, and a rejection of reality. And I want to just take each of those in turn. So the issue of racism had two aspects. One was the obvious appeal that Trump made from the very beginning of when he first announced he was running in 2015, and continuously hitting the racial button when it came to white people, and playing to the fears among large numbers of whites of what's been called in North America, Europe, and South Africa, the fear of white genocide or white replacement. This whole notion that the demographics are going to eliminate white people from this planet. And Trump continuously played to this sort of fear. He also played to a related fear in the aftermath of the protests and uprisings that followed the murder of George Floyd. And essentially, he did what Nixon successfully did in 1968, where Nixon played to the issue of instability, civil disorder, and the need to return to some level of normality, and used that to walk into the White House along with his Southern strategy. Now, while Trump was not successful in his reelection bid, that was part of what his game was. And it was successful in terms of mobilizing large numbers of whites, many of whom sat out 2016, or at least didn't vote for him in 2016, and it encouraged people to go forward. The aftermath of the George Floyd murder, on the other hand, inspired large numbers of African Americans and younger voters to come forward in record numbers. And so both of those factors were true. It's something that we always have to think about at the strategic level. Revanchism. Revanchism is a term we don't use much in the United States. It's been generally associated with Germany after World War I and World War II. And it's a politics of revenge, but a specific kind of revenge where someone is arguing that something was taken from them and they want it back. And in the case of the United States, the revanchism has been central to the reemergence of right-wing populism and the idea that the white male republic of the 1950s is no longer there. And that in a nutshell, it doesn't pay to be white anymore. And that revanchism is saying, let us return to the world of Leave It to Beaver and Donna Reed. Let us return to a point where the United States was at its pinnacle, where the United States could say, shoot them up, hands up to the rest of the world, and no one could question it. That's central to revanchism, and there's different elements. There's racism, there's sexism and misogyny, that we see in the whole threat as far as the right is concerned to gender roles, and particularly the role of women in the workforce and women outside of work, outside of the home in general. You know, one of the things that was very interesting about Trump's last several weeks before the election was his appeal to white suburban women voters, And a number of people made note of this. And it was really interesting. If you listen to his speeches, he really was making an appeal to Donna Reed. It was as if he didn't realize that the world had changed since the 1950s. So revanchism. The third is the rejection of reality. And this is very scary. That millions of people, certainly not all of the Trump voters, but millions of people voted against reality. They essentially voted to join the Flat Earth Society in mass. And they did so when you look at what happened with their response to the COVID crisis, that people would accept Trump's proposition that this really was a bad flu, and that there was no real need for national coordination, and that he was doing the best that he could. This rejection of reality there, this rejection of the extent of the environmental crisis, catastrophe that we're facing. So what we see is people absolutely and adamantly denying reality, but also in those cases, and this goes to the final point about this, in those cases where people may not have been explicitly racist or sexist or denying reality, they were prepared to go along with a political leader who hit all of those buttons. And they were complicit, regardless of their intent. I read an article just the other day that was making an interesting point, and I'm going to, I think, stop here and open up for questions about those that rationally voted for Trump. And actually, I have 2 points. So there's this, and then there's zombies. The rational voters, by this article was arguing, is that there were people, this is where it really comes down in many cases to class, that there were people in the upper 1% that had a material interest in supporting Trump. To the extent to which people had viewed this election from their narrow self-interest, there were different segments of the population that could justify supporting Trump even if they didn't agree with him on a whole host of other things. So the upper 1%, small business, you were talking about small business in connection with Proposition 15. Large segments of small business embraced Trump's deregulatory message. There were people that were working, that where the economy had been improving for them, at least at the level of jobs and employment. And while we on the left could say, well, wait a minute, I mean, this was a trajectory that started under Obama. And that's true, we know that, but many people aren't going to necessarily have the same kind of economic analysis. They're saying, I'm working now, I wasn't working before, so maybe Trump is doing something well. And what I think that this will point to is that we have to think very carefully when we're crafting messages that the frame of reference that many of us that are progressive and left have, other people don't share it. And we actually have to win them over, which goes to my final point. Zombies. When you look at US elections, what you'll find is that roughly about 25% of the electorate are people I consider zombies. That is, they've lost their humanity. And as I like to say, as a student of zombieism, I have a doctorate in zombieism. I can tell you that once people become zombies, they can never return to being humans. And you all know that because you've watched zombie movies at some point. Once you become a zombie, that's it. And that is true of about 25% of the electorate. Forget them. They have lost their humanity. You can't argue them out of their lack of empathy and their inclination towards fascist and other kinds of authoritarian solutions. So the good news is that we probably have about 75% of the electorate to work with. But many of those people are influenced by zombieism. So what we have to do is understand that this is a divided country. No surprise, because it's always been divided. After all, we had a civil war. If you look at most of the presidential elections, it's not like there is at the level of the popular vote a humongous difference. In the 1960 election, for example, Kennedy won by less than 1% of the popular vote. So every so often you'll get larger numbers, but very frequently it's close. What's different now is that part of what's happening on the right is a questioning of the legitimacy of the federal state and the encouragement by a major political party to not only destroy voting rights, but to engage in de facto alliances with armed fascists. Periodically in US history, this has happened. In 1898, there was an armed overthrow of the government in Wilmington, North Carolina. We've had fascist and quasi-fascist organizations throughout our history. But now at the presidential level, you've had someone who has openly sided with, encouraged or turned a blind eye to this element. The zombie element within Trump's base is prepared to accept this and encourage this. So that's why I came up with a zombie test, which you can all use. I haven't patented this. The zombie test is 3 questions that you can ask to determine whether someone is a zombie. And this applies even after the election. The first question, in light of the fact that Trump disparaged US veterans and deceased military servicemen and women, what did you do or what did you say? Question 2, in light of the fact that it has been proven that Trump lied about what he knew regarding the COVID crisis and explicitly misled the population, what did you do or what did you say? And the third question, in light of the fact that Trump is apparently in debt to at least $400 million and no one seems to know to whom, and will not reveal his tax returns, what did you say or what did you do? And what you will find is that if you ask those questions, whoever does a dance like Fred Astaire is someone that you absolutely have no need to continue the discussion with because they are gone. We need to concentrate on strengthening our forces in order to win anyone over that may be on the verge of becoming a full zombie. But spending your time on those that have fallen under the sway of zombieism is absolutely pointless because they exist in a world with a self-reinforcing bubble, part of which is Fox News, that convinces them that they understand the truth and that it is we that are out of touch with reality. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so as before with questions, if you have a question, you can go to the chat. Make sure you click on the drop-down menu for everyone. So you're talking to everyone and not just one other person, and put stack in there. You can raise your hand using the participant box. At the bottom of the participant box, there's a raising hand function, and I'll see that and call on you. You can raise your hand physically. If that doesn't work, I see a Mo, and you can write down your questions in the chat and I'll ask the question for you. Okay, I see Charlie Hinton and then Mo. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hi, thanks to all the participants. This has been really good. My concern with Trump is that he has no intention to leave office. The stonewalling the transition is just the first step, and that replacing Esper and the people in the defense, in the Pentagon, the civilian Pentagon people, is his goal is to control domestic disturbances. And do you see a danger of him? I think he's actually trying to pull off a coup if we let him. And I'd like your response to that.
I've been very worried about the possibility of a coup since the spring. And I've been struck by the level of denial in much of the progressive movement of such a possibility. I think what's happening right now is that the Republicans are starting to fragment. And that Trump is acting more like a 13-year-old. And he is very upset, as Obama said the other day on 60 Minutes, he doesn't like to not only lose, he doesn't like to admit loss. But there is some sort of fragmentation that seems to be underway within the Republican Party and within his own administration. I do not think he can count on the military to back him up. The military, at worst, from our side, is split. But at least from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it appears that they have no interest in backing up a coup. He could probably count on DHS and many local police departments, but that would be very, very risky.
And white militias.
And, right. Now, so the danger remains, and that means that if he tries something, we have to shut the country down. And it can't be one of these very nice, comfortable Saturday marches in the sunshine, as long as it's not raining, not too much snow on the ground, et cetera. It has to be shutting the country down. And enough on that for right now. I think that another possibility that looks quite reasonable is that Trump will never concede defeat. He will acknowledge it. And then he will announce that he's going to run for president in 2024. And this is going to be something that will piss off Republican potential candidates like Ted Cruz, because they will know that if he announces that, that's going to make it very difficult for anyone else to run against him. That he will probably continue various forms of obstructionism. And this is one of the reasons that we progressives are going to have to make sure that the watchword for the Biden-Harris administration is audacity, audacity, always audacity, and not reaching across the aisle playing nicey-nicey the way Obama tried to do in 2009. It's like, this is, we push, and we push hard. And that will run counter to who Biden is, which is why we need to stand behind him, a nose length behind him, so that he cannot turn around.
Okay, our next question is from Mo. Mo, are you there? I don't see you right now. If Mo is not, maybe he's trying to unmute himself. I don't see him anymore.
He's here, but he's on mute.
Okay, I don't see his icon. So I have to find him and unmute him. So I'm going to do that right now. If I can find him.
Art,
yeah.
Do you see the two people on stack, Robin and Pyra?
Yes, I did. I've already acknowledged them, but Mo was next, and I just need to find him and unmute him. So that's what I'm doing right now. Sorry, everybody. There he is. Okay, there you go. I'm trying to unmute you, Mo. Let's see. Don't talk yet because you're not being heard. I'm clicking on your unmute button and it's not responding.
It's not working.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go for it.
Okay, so sorry, I don't see any of you, but it doesn't really matter. I wondered, this is more of a historical question and maybe inappropriate to ask now, but do you think Trump has been necessary in the sense that things have to get worse before they get better? And also the fact that his extremism really laid bare, if we didn't know it already, really laid bare not just the fissures in this country, but the inadequacies of the political system. And I think before you heal anything, you have to see it. And we can't avoid seeing it right now.
I don't think that the worse things get, the better they are for us, because they can always get worse. Right? I think that I've been saying for a while that what Trump did is that he pulled the picture of Dorian Gray out from the closet.
Right.
For everybody to see.
Yeah.
And that many of us thought that the US was a civilized society, that many people thought that it was post-racial, that it was respectable. And what we discovered is that none of that is true, that this is a very barbaric society. We have a hard right-wing party in the form of the Republicans that are not committed to democracy, that are prepared. They're the only, in the advanced capitalist world, they're the only major political party outside of perhaps Russia that which has voter suppression as a major part of their strategy. So to your point, I think that it has been eye-opening, but very scary. And I think one of the reasons I don't use the term Trumpism is that what we have to understand is that we're dealing with a phenomenon called right-wing populism. As my wife says, Trump is the rattle on the tail of the rattlesnake. He's not the snake. The snake has been traveling around for a while, putting its fangs into the body politic, inserting poison. Trump is the one that's been making the noise. And you can knock the rattle off. That doesn't kill the snake. And this is what we have to deal with. We have a poison in our system from something, a right-wing mass movement of millions of people. It's right-wing populist movement that has an armed wing. I think people realize that now. The question is, what are we going to do?
Okay, the next person is Robin. I've got to unmute you though.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
There you go. No, you're okay. Go ahead.
So you can hear me?
Yes.
So my question is, somehow I got on the emails of the Republicans. I have no idea how that happened. I didn't sign up for it, but I was getting about emails from 5 or 6 Republican organizations. So from time to time, I would dip in and look at them. And what I saw is that they were dividing the world into good guys and bad guys. And they were labeling everything on literally black and white. So they were the good guys, we were the bad guys. We were called snowflakes and worse. We were called demon rats, etc. And what I want to ask is, they have a coherent worldview in terms of they go, this is this and this is that, but it's wrong. And I was saying, you know, on chat sites, we're not snowflakes. You know, please, let's stop the labeling. And so I want to address this psychological desire to label good and bad instead of seeing human beings. And if you could
Thanks for
maybe
your
discuss this,
question, Robin.
my question is that they're skewing reality by labeling as good and bad. And I think this has to be addressed because that's what they're adhering to.
I think we got your question.
Yeah.
Well, you see, we are bad. As far as they're concerned, we are bad. We represent everything that they oppose. I don't fault them for that. They just happen to be wrong. I mean, the reality is that there is a struggle. There is a power struggle underway. And there are those at the top and their minions down below that have a view of what needs to happen that includes our literal annihilation. That is the annihilation of the left. I don't fault them for that. They just happen to be wrong. And they also happen to have lost their humanity. That is who they are. And I think that we have to understand these are things, this is where I disagree with much of the Democratic Party establishment. They seem to think that the problem is a lack of civility. You know, that if we only could speak nicely to one another. No, let's be real. A right-wing movement reemerged after the defeat of Goldwater that was intent on overthrowing the 20th century. That's their objective, to overthrow everything that we won in the 20th century. They are not interested in taking prisoners, which is why there's no place in the Republican Party for people like Colin Powell, right? People who consider themselves liberal Republicans. There's no place because the Republican Party has become a hard right-wing party. It's actually quite different from the Democratic Party, even though there are obvious differences within the Republican Party. But they have embraced a particular kind of worldview. And there's no place for us in their worldview. And so when I say that they're zombies, it's not like I'm just using names. These are people that have lost their humanity.
Okay, Bill, there's another question from P. Ra of SDA. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that properly.
Let's try Pyra instead.
Okay, there you go.
Think Greek, even though I'm not. The thing is, we have over 73 million people voted for Trump. And basically, a lot of it I see is that there's some basic need that they're not getting, and frustration to the point that a lot of people are operating under the thing, he's an a-hole, but he's our a-hole. Mm-hmm. So there's that frustration of not getting what their needs, or perceiving not getting what their needs. And I think the Democratic Party, and I want to know how you would see it, how to address those needs, whatever that may be. I know they got to the point that due to the frustration, they will believe anything that supports this notion that they're being screwed. But they have basic needs that are not being addressed, and this is how they are manifesting by supporting a person like number 45. So what are those needs that you perceive, and how can we approach that and showing that those needs need to be addressed and how to address those needs? And do it with a backbone.
Yeah. It's an interesting question because there's needs and then there's needs.
Yes.
So on the one hand, I think we need a very different kind of leadership of the Democratic Party. I think we need one that is advancing a progressive populist message that is calling for significant structural changes that speak to the environmental catastrophe, to the various forms of oppression that have historically been rooted in this country, all of that. We need a Green New Deal. We need real jobs. So on the one hand, there are needs, but then there are also certain needs that we can't answer. So in other words, if there's someone that basically believes that they really should be treated better than people of color, we can't address those needs. If they're really, if someone basically believes, well, the US does have a right to go into Venezuela or Bolivia and do whatever, or bomb Iran, we can't address those needs. If someone is saying, you know, I really don't like the idea that my wife is working and is in my face, we can't address those needs. So there's needs and there's needs. I think that there are material needs that the Democratic Party needs to speak to about the future of this planet and about embracing civilization and fighting barbarism. We can do that. But people that are running around afraid that white people are on the verge of extermination, I mean, what can I say to them, right? It's sort of like, what do you say to someone in a Flat Earth Society? How do you convince someone in a Flat Earth Society, and they actually do exist, that the Earth is round? Because at a certain point, there's people that develop a vested interest in a completely irrational framework. And as far as I'm concerned, they're not a priority.
Okay, we have a question from Ellen R., but I cannot unmute her. Ellen, can you try to unmute yourself?
I'm here. I just wanted to bring attention earlier to some raised hands. Thank you.
Okay, so are there more questions? Is there somebody I'm not seeing in the queue? We're pretty close to the end.
You're not seeing Dolores or Dave.
Okay, Dolores and Dave, go.
Dave, you go first.
Yeah, I couldn't get into the chat, but my question is, in the recent election, many people, like in Florida, and I guess maybe Filipinos, people of color were concerned about aspects of the progressive message from the Democrats because they were afraid of, quote, socialism, because they equate that to a totalitarian socialism. And could you address that issue, because I think it's a serious problem for Democrats.
Well, it's not a new problem. I mean, since the 19th century, anytime any kind of progressive movement has arisen, the other side has always waved the flag of anarchism, communism, or anything else. So it's not new. It's a good way of trying to suppress discussion. I think what we saw in this case was an appeal to two different things. One is fear in response to the post-George Floyd protests and uprisings. And the other was a particular appeal to Latin American emigre populations that have run away from what was called the pink tide countries, like Venezuela, Bolivia, and others, and gone to Florida. And so the Trump message was, if you don't want the United States to become like Venezuela, Cuba, Bolivia, et cetera, then vote Republican. Well, anyone with half a brain looking at even a quarter of a brain, how about an eighth of a brain, looking at Biden, you would never conclude that Biden was a socialist. I mean, there is no way in hell that anybody could conclude he was a socialist. But it's a wonderful way to encourage fear. And it also covers a host of other sins. Like if Biden and Harris gets in, well, wait a minute, we actually have a person of color as the vice president. Now, a lot of these emigres, I want to point out, are from the upper crust of Latin America. And if you've done any study of Latin America and you know the way the racial dynamics works, you know that the upper crust is not particularly dark. And so that is a factor. So I think that there was a lot of appeal to fear there that had absolutely no basis in reality and really didn't, as far as I can tell, didn't have much of an impact outside of Florida.
I'd like to comment too.
We're getting down to the end. Can you make it really quick, Dolores?
Yes. I just want to second something that Bill Fletcher said. I don't think it's our position that we should take the position that we have to appease these people who have bought into the American myth that the whites are superior. And while our economy was based on stolen land from the Native Americans and 400 years of free labor of the slaves from Africa that set us off as a booming economy back in the 18th century. I mean, why must we constantly appease these people?
Okay, thank you, Dolores.
We should educate them about the real history of this country.
Thank you. And I'd like to leave time for one more question because we're down to the end. The caller with the phone number 8442, it's your turn.
Yeah, that's Karen.
Go ahead, Karen. The last question. This is the last question.
I have a real quickie, and that is hearkening back to the thoughts about a coup. Does anybody know what the military vote looks like?
I haven't heard. I haven't heard any reports on that. I just know what the polls had said before, which was that Biden was ahead among the active troops.
Okay.
And Art, there's a question here by Sylvia. I don't quite understand.
Go ahead.
Hello.
I have been waiting for my turn. Hold on. Too many.
Is it in the
Echo,
chat?
echo.
Is
Okay.
it in the chat?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
I want to say something. I put it in the chat. You give a very thorough analysis, but I see that the person come with a numerous agenda, so he never run out of any cruel play cards. And we need to do some character assassination on him, but find it difficult to shoot an entertainer, which he seems to be. And then I agree with your that he is only the tail, not the head. And then a few days ago, I read that the Cox brother, the one that survived, is coming out and saying that he is one of the contributor. I don't think he's the real one, because he's manly enough to come out and say, and that he wants to be a change person.
Okay, Sylvia, thank you. We're going to let Bill finish because we're down to the last minute.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this thing with the Koch brother, basically saying that he's discovered sweetness and light. I mean, this is one of those moments when I'm from Missouri, he's going to have to prove that one. But I think that the issue with Trump is what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to figure out how to disrupt the strategy of the Republicans and to disrupt his base. And that means that we've got to get our stuff together. And we need to be thinking right now about the midterm elections, right now, or at least by January 1st. We'll take a few weeks off, but then start thinking about the midterm elections.
We have a couple more questions for you. I'm running, it's 3 o'clock. There's a demonstration I have to go to. I'm the host. And I'd like, Bill, can you take questions from people by email? Can you answer them if they can't?
Well, yeah, I mean, if they, as long as it is not involving a lot of writing, because I do writing all the time.
Yeah, maybe they can put it in the chat for you or send you an email. Do you want to?
You can send me an email to
What's your email address?
billfletcherjr@gmail.com.
Would you repeat
and
that? I talked
Bill
over you.
Fletcher Jr., all one word, @gmail.com.
Okay, thank you very much for being here
Okay.
today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take
There
care
is
now.
a demonstration right now in San Francisco in support of the United States Postal Service. It's at Fox Plaza, 1390 Market Street. So support the postal workers and thank you all for coming. Call your members of Congress, tell them to don't let the Trump administration play games with our postal service. They need $25 billion. They've been handicapped by giant weights put on their legs by an unfair prepayment of their pension. It's tragic what's happened to this institution that is so as American as apple pie. Look up United States Postal Workers and say a friendly word to your local postal worker. And thanks for coming today, and stay tuned for next month's announcement. Go ahead.
Thank you. I know many people are disturbed with right-wingers and anti-racist actions, or armed right-wingers driving through Black communities like Marin cities. And how can we defend ourselves? A Progressive Labor Party is showing a hopeful movie on next Saturday on the Deacons for Defense. They were chapters of armed Blacks who were able to fend off Black Klan terror during the 1960s South. We're showing it next Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. And if you want to get on, email mlyon01@comcast.net to get login information. So again, it's mlyon01@comcast.net. And thank you.
Thank you. And
I have a small announcement. I just put in the chat. SDA is having a pedestrian safety class this Friday, and I just put the information in the chat.
Okay, we'll save the chat, and anybody who wants to get the chat can email me or the Gray Panthers. You can reach us through our website, I believe, correct, Michael? Or you can send an email to artpersico@gmail.com. It's ARTPERSYKO@gmail.com.
Thank you. Now go protest.
Art, Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. Did you record this Zoom?
yes, I did.
Okay, I don't know how to get access to it, but I'm assuming you can email.
I think there'd be a link we can send you. So if you want the link from this recording, send me an email.
Okay, I think Lou's probably got your email, but give it to me real quick.
Yeah, Lou Church has my email.
If he went off the call, I think it'd be useful for him to hear that whole presentation from Matt. So.
Okay, so I'm gonna end this this program, this meeting, and thank you all for coming. If you want more information, email artpersico@gmail.com. That's ARTPERSYKO@gmail.com. And hopefully we'll hook up with you and keep you in touch with the SF Gray Panthers, and we'll have another forum next month. Oh, and if anybody would like to join the board of the Gray Panthers, please let us know, because we need new board members as well as regular members.
Great job, Art.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, see you later, and support your local postal worker.